are poor families much more likely to be in the system? It's an interesting question. And one of the biggest things that we have, obviously several possibilities here, but I don't want us to just think of the poverty as third world country poverty from the standpoint people think, well, they can't eat, they have no food, they have no electricity. You know, that's not always the case. Now, that is the case sometimes. I freely admit that. It is not always the case because there are a lot of what we call working poor, and I am not going to get into what sociology or history or so many other groups identify as the working poor. Our definition that we work with here is even if they are both parents are working or whatever parental units are there in the home, are working full-time jobs or multiple jobs, and they just don't rise above the poverty level, they're considered poor. And that also includes those that just they might be paycheck to paycheck, they might barely be getting by with zero extras, but they might be able to supply 95% of what they need, but that other 5% just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger every month, and so they're more and more in the hole, so to speak, every month. And it's not like they're spending their money on cell phones and flashy cars and things like that. They are very much trying to just, you know, how many packs of ramen can we live on? Can I afford to get ramen and hot dogs for us to live on, or peanut butter for the next couple of weeks because, man, this just happened and we don't have the money to cover it. But I need to, say, fix the car because if I don't have a job and I can't do anything. And those are the kind of choices that they're making. A lot of these families have slashed healthcare completely. They're not paying for healthcare because there's a cost to it. Or they have that minimum bit that comes in, but the copays are so high that they choose not to go to the doctor, or they choose not to get dental or medical treatment because it means that they're going to have to cut back, and there's no other place for them to cut back. They're already living on peanut butter and ramen, and there's nothing else that they can do. There's no other place. So I want you to think more like that. Families that do have income coming in. Now, there are other reasons why people might be in poverty, but I do want you to consider that it is not a choice necessarily. It is not that they aren't working. It's not that they're lazy. It's not that they aren't trying in many of the cases. In some, I grant you, there's always going to be some that are like that, and those are the ones that typically get those, that get the notice and the publicity, so to speak. But there are a lot of people who know that they're really poor, that like any one thing could set them over the edge. That is an extraordinarily stressful place to be. And we all understand that stress increases the risk of child abuse and neglect significantly. These are the families that are much more likely to come into the system because of neglect, because they don't have a daycare, so they leave the children home alone so they can go work because they can't afford a babysitter. Typically, they're not coming in from like a physical or a sexual abuse or something on that. These families come to the system typically out of neglect. Poverty itself is a huge, major risk of abuse. Again, you've got that stress, you've got so much else going on. There are other things. Children living in poverty are much more likely to have difficulty in school, become teen parents as adults, and earn less and be unemployed more. It's because they haven't been able to get over, for the most part, you know, that like I said, they're working, but like any one thing sets them behind. Well, if you've got a parent that's working their hardest, and they might be working a couple of 2-3 jobs to try and make ends meet as best they can, they don't have necessarily the same time to sit down and help their children learn how to read, which becomes crucial to education the ability to read and comprehend is crucial from 3rd grade on in the school systems, the way that they are set up. And so if they didn't have that good reading ability, and the parents can't show up to the APs, or because they're working, or they're not getting the good health care, and or maybe they just didn't realize that the child needed some glasses or a hearing aid or something like that, and it's a luxury that they can't afford anyway. That is where we come in. And understand that this is a poverty issue as more than it is a neglect issue. So children who come from homes of poverty are at greater risk of impaired brain development, and this is due to these factors as well as some other ones. But that inadequate nutrition, their brains are not being fed appropriately. We all know that nutrition is huge in your ability to think, learn, and pay attention in class and be able to remember and understand. Parental substance abuse, huge. If the parents are earning a decent living, but they're spending most of the money or all of the money on drugs or addiction or something like, gambling addiction or something like that, then it's as if the money was never even made. Maternal depression, this is one where, you may have had a mom who was working, and then when they had this baby, they were really excited about it, but now she can't work because she can't afford daycare, she can't leave the baby, she's already potentially battling depression, postpartum depression, and that turns into maternal depression because she can't do better for her children, and she can't earn like she used to. It becomes this huge thing, and causes many mothers to become depressed. Exposure to environmental toxins. One of the things that I talk about this is, so we know that there are certain things, there are certain chemicals that are worse than others. And so in the grocery store, if you're buying your cleaning supplies and you know that this is a healthier choice and it doesn't have as many toxins in it, but this one is cheaper, if you have to watch every penny, you may be using that cheaper item, and that means you're going to have more toxins, different things like that. I literally last night watched where someone took an older can from a major retailer. It's not their fault, okay? Well, maybe, I don't know, maybe it is, but anyway, this major retailer, and that also sells food, and they had a can of corn that was that store's generic brand, and this store is already known as being very inexpensive. That's how they built they're everywhere, but that's how they built their brand. And the original can had a little tag on it, part of the label that said it was good for you, and when you looked at the back, you could see the ingredients and everything like that. And then this new can from the same retailer, she found the old one in the closet. I think she said she had gotten it a couple of years ago. And then this new can of corn actually has a warning label that it has some chemicals in it that have been shown to cause cancer in California. And I understand that California mandates a lot of these labels, and it seems like it's on everything. However, when you did a side-by-side comparison, you saw that the ingredients were different, that there were added chemicals in the new one, but it was cheap, it was inexpensive, and it looks like it's healthy, but when you start to read the label, there's nothing you can do. So then she bought another, a brand name recently at that same store, and did a label to comparison, and guess what? That new corn didn't have all those same chemicals and did not have the California warning label on it. So that was just something that I literally saw last night that I was shocked about and really got me going, because I was like, these families that are watching every penny, just trying to feed their families and do the right thing, they can't afford the more expensive corn. They can't afford that other stuff. They used to be able to trust this distributor, this store, but now this packaged corn has chemicals that have been shown, clinically shown, to cause cancers and other negative health effects. And you kind of get to the point where like, wait, I shouldn't need that warning label on my can of corn, but that can of corn is way less expensive than these other two. And so this is what happens. So that's one of the ways that we talk about exposure to environmental toxins. Low quality daycare, you get who you can afford, not necessarily who's the best daycare provider, because the best daycare providers are extremely expensive. So that's something else. That is another risk factor of the poverty. So I want you to think, I know that you can think of some other risk factors. Keep in mind, anytime we do a list, this is not a comprehensive list. We try and be as careful as to show a great variety of things, but there's always more. This is why we want you to become familiar with what some of the risk factors of poverty are and different things like that.